I hate when I have so many screens open. There we go. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be focusing on resilience, small steps for self-care. And we're so happy to have Maureen Pollard here with us. Before we begin the webinar today, I do want to do a brief land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we gather on traditional territories of a number of First Nations and acknowledge their stewardship of this land throughout the ages. We seek a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one that is based in honor and deep respect. Thank you. So just a few very general housekeeping items. All of the communications for the attendees during our webinar are automatically muted. So we do encourage you to use the chat box. Also, as our speakers, including myself, will be visible while the presentation is ongoing. And of course, as always, we like to provide a question answer period at the end of our webinar. We're happy to be able to offer ASL interpreters, and you'll be able to see the name of our ASL interpreter 1 as well as ASL interpreter 2 if you make sure that you click gallery view when you're viewing this webinar. You're also able to adjust the speaker or the slideshow images. So just there's a line in between the two. You can drag them either way to make either our videos bigger or the slides larger. And of course, we encourage you to chat, post your comments and thoughts in the chat box. For the question answer period, to make it a little bit more concise, we ask you to put it in the Q&A portion of the webinar, so then we're able to post the questions to our speaker at the end of the session. As all of our webinars are recorded, we are recording this webinar today, and it will be made available on our website within a few days after the webinar. And we do ask you to complete an evaluation. It will automatically pop up at the end of the webinar, and I promise you it will only take just mere moments. And this is where we get all of your feedback, and then we're able to design webinars like what we're offering you today. So we would really appreciate that. Thank you. And then, of course, with many of our webinars that we offer to our community and stakeholders, many times there could be personal circumstances or, of course, issues that participants really want to have addressed. But in keeping with our commitment in maintaining your privacy and your confidentiality, today we only will be answering very general questions and themes. However, we encourage, if anyone wants to discuss specific circumstances, we invite you to directly contact one of the staff members that is hosting the webinar, and then we'll be able to assist you further. So just a little bit about who we are. I'm sure everyone here can agree with our simple goals and mission is that we envision an Ontario where absolutely all seniors are free from abuse, have a strong voice, and feel safe and respected. And the ways in which we do this is what we're doing today, is raising awareness, hosting webinars, providing frontline training to service delivery organizations. And of course, we work collaboratively with like-minded organizations. And these are the pillars. We are mandated to implement the provincial government's strategy to combat elder abuse. And these are the strategies which really guides the work that we as staff do every day on that public awareness, training of frontline staff, and coordination of community services. Now we're going to hop right into it. I am thrilled to introduce Maureen Pollard. I do know Maureen from our past work with Victim Services Peterborough, so I couldn't be more thrilled to see your face today. Maureen is a registered social worker with over 30 years of experience working with individuals, families, groups. In private practice, Maureen specializes in grief, trauma, and resilience. Without further ado, please welcome Maureen today.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys as well, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to come and talk about resilience today with people who are here. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Maureen.
Right, I'm going to just share my screen. And we're going to talk today about resilience. And this presentation is called Small Steps on the Path, because what I want everyone to be thinking about, is that it really is a matter of taking small steps to take care of yourself that helps us move through difficult times. And also to stay well during good times. So as we get started, I want us to think about what the risk factors might be for burnout. And as I ask these questions, just consider yourself. Self-awareness is a big part of resilience and self-care. So thinking about whether or not you might be a people pleaser, for example. When we are a people pleaser, we often push our own needs aside in order to try and meet other people's needs, and we elevate their needs above ours, which can leave us really struggling. Eventually, we can burn out as a result. Are you a person who feels responsible for fixing things? You know, it's a risk factor for burnout because sometimes we are in situations where there's something that can't be fixed. When we're dealing with, for example, grief, the loss can't be fixed, and the pain that results from the loss is a part of that experience, and we're not really there to fix the pain either. We're just there to companion people as they heal, as they adapt to their circumstances. So if you think that it's your responsibility to fix things, you have an increased risk of burnout. Similarly, if you are the kind of person that always wants to take charge, to be in control, then you're also at risk for burnout because, in fact, there are so many things in life that we can't control. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later in the presentation. Just noticing right now, if you might be the kind of person who likes to take charge of things, which means that maybe you're expending your energy on things that resist being taken charge of. It's also a risk factor for burnout to believe that you're the only one who can do something. And so there's a process where when we start to have some skills and experience and knowledge, we start to feel obligated to use them, and we start to have this feeling that we should show up as an expert. And then we start sometimes to think we're the only person with that particular skill set. And we might, we all bring something unique. So we might be the only person who does it our way, but that doesn't mean we're the only person who can do it. So thinking that you're the only person that can do something is a risk factor for burnout as well. Burnout really is a struggle when we're burning our candle at both ends. You can see that this person is balanced on a candle that's burning at both ends, and that fulcrum or pivot point that candle is balanced on looks pretty risky too. So I also want to spend a moment talking about helping versus rescuing behaviors, because there is a difference between helping someone and trying to rescue them. But when we think about a helper, we're thinking about someone who listens for the request and then presents an offer of what they can do that will meet that request. They give only as much as they're asked for, only what's needed, following the person's lead. So whoever needs the help, you follow their need. A rescuer is more defined by behavior that includes giving things that aren't asked for, trying to give more than is what's needed, seeking specific results. So the rescuer has in mind what the outcome should be, and they feel bad when they get turned down or when things don't go their way. And so you can see that if you have rescuer tendencies, that puts you in a bind because it might put more pressure on the person who needs assistance, but it also puts more pressure on you. And a helper, taking the stance of a helper, is actually helpful in preventing burnout because you are not expending energy that isn't invited or welcomed. And I also want to talk about this idea of the window of tolerance. Many of you may have heard of this before. Basically, when we're doing well, we function in this window of tolerance and we're able to manage our thoughts and our feelings. We're able to use our logic and respond appropriately to the things that we encounter. When we are under significant stress, we can go out that window of tolerance. We can bump up into hyperarousal, which is a place where we are overwhelmed and having really intense reactions. Or we can bump down into hypoarousal, where we kind of shut down or numb out. And so when we're approaching burnout, we can sometimes see ourselves moving into one of those states, hyper or hypoarousal. So just pausing for a moment and kind of thinking about yourself and how you're feeling, what's happening in your life. Do you feel kind of like you're balanced? Do you feel like you're in that window of tolerance where you're able to cope and think well? Or are you kind of feeling some signs and symptoms that you're struggling? You know, if you're feeling, whether you're feeling well or feeling like you're struggling, we're going to talk today about the things you can do that will help you stay in your best frame of mind in that window of tolerance. So thinking about getting in your own green zone, you know, being ready to go, feeling good about things. One of the things that's important to do is to really deliberately notice rewarding experiences or positives. We're going to talk some more about that as well today. You may need to redefine success. So, you know, in a pre-pandemic world, my days and weeks looked a particular way with the work that I do as a social worker and a social work educator. And when the pandemic hit, everything changed, both in my private practice and in the teaching that I do, and in the webinars I deliver or presentations. And so I had to rethink, what did success look like in this new environment? I couldn't measure it by the same old measurements that I was using pre-pandemic. And it's also helpful if we can notice the things that we're doing well. Notice when we're feeling well, you know? So when I talk to you about noticing the signs that you are either in your window of tolerance or in hypo or hyper arousal, that self-awareness and noticing the good that you're doing and feeling is important. And it comes along with the idea of having gratitude and being able to hold hope. When we're in our green zone, when we're feeling good, we can hold hope for ourselves and for others. So the American Psychological Association defined resilience in 2015 as the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity, trauma, and stress. And I always like to point out here that they defined it as the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity, trauma, and stress, not to avoid adversity, trauma, and stress. Because really, as humans, we don't get to avoid it. All of us will face some adversity and some level of some kinds of trauma and some stress throughout our lifetime. So today we're going to focus on what are personal resilience factors. What are some of the things that you can do, the ways that you can handle things so that you are able to be at your best as often as possible. The first thing that I want to talk about is the idea of coping with thoughts. How we think about things matters. How we think about things can influence what we do, how we feel, how we interact with other people. And so I just like this example in the cartoon of this woman who says, I have a lot of excitement in my life. I used to call it tension, but I feel better now that I call it excitement. Right? So our language matters. How we talk about things represents how we think about things. How we think about things matters in terms of how we feel about the stuff that we have to do. We also want to talk about coping with feelings and remember that feelings can be like waves. We can't stop them from coming, but we can choose which ones to surf. So when we try to resist feelings, we don't want to feel sad or we don't want to feel hurt or afraid, when we try to resist them, it's kind of like trying to stand still when a wave in the ocean is coming. You know, you can't really resist that wave in the ocean, and you can't really resist the wave of feeling either. You can more effectively handle a wave if you dive into it head first, but that takes a lot of energy. You can also effectively handle a wave if you relax and let yourself surf, let the wave carry you. So thinking about your feelings when they come, how do you let them happen? How do you dive into them and experience them, or do you surf them and wait for them to shift and recede? Right? But thinking about that is part of what will help you feel resilient. Similarly, we want to talk about creative problem solving when it comes to resilience. You know, if we always do things the way we've always done them, we'll always get the same results. And so creative problem solving is about, how do you think about something differently? What's the need I'm trying to meet? What are the other ways I can meet that need? And I like this cartoon that says, what would MacGyver do? Because MacGyver was a character in an 80s action show, and he could solve problems using anything that was around him. And I feel like I can still use that reference because the Urban Dictionary includes the word MacGyvered as one of the words in their language. So being creative about solving problems, but also being smart about setting goals, right? So a SMART goal is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-oriented. And so we want to think, when we're making goals, how can we make them useful to us? You know, I need to eat healthy. I need to eat nutritious food. If I set a goal that I was never going to eat chocolate again, that would not be a SMART goal for me, because it's not probably achievable at this point in my life. I enjoy chocolate. I don't want to exclude it. A SMART goal might be to include a serving of vegetables at lunch and dinner every day. Right? It's measurable, a serving of vegetables. It's time-oriented every day, or 5 days a week, or whatever my SMART goal is, right? And so we can see in this cartoon of Mr. Mallard complaining that Miss Mallard doesn't support his dream of moving to the desert, because moving to the desert might not be a SMART goal for a duck. Accepting change is another really important part of resilience. Change is coming. We can't avoid change. And so when we think about change, this is another piece where your self-awareness comes into play. Think about whether you are a change avoider or a change seeker. So if you're a change avoider, you prefer things to stay the same. You don't like change and actively try to keep things the same. And if you're a change seeker, you're actually out there looking for change and trying to instigate it on a regular basis. And I just want to say that there's nothing wrong with either end of that spectrum or anywhere in between. What happens, though, is when you are self-aware, if you know you don't like change, but you know and accept that change is coming, then you can prepare for change in a way that is going to help you adapt to it. And if you're a change seeker, I invite you to consider, are you seeking change for something positive, or are you trying to avoid or escape something by implementing those changes? And so thinking about accepting change and how we maneuver and navigate change is an important part of resilience. Similarly, it's important to think about resilience from the ideas of optimism and perspective. So on the left of the screen, we have the cartoon that has two glasses. One says I'm half full, the other says I'm half empty, and they have a smiley face on the half full and frowny face on the half empty cup. And the idea becomes that, you know, if we're optimistic, we think positively. Perspective tells us that the glass is actually always full. And we see in the picture on the right that the glass is half full of water and half full of air. And so what helps us in resilience is actually a sense of realistic optimism. So not that always be cheerful no matter what, But let's have some realistic optimism, and that takes us back to the idea of holding hope that I mentioned on how to get to your green zone. It's important to, when we think about resilience, to consider what we can control. You know, there is so much in life that we can't control. We can't control other people. We can't control our situations or the environment sometimes. Most often we can't, actually. And so when we look at this quote that says, we can't direct the wind, but we can adjust our sails, then it reminds us that what we can control is this very limited range of things. The way that I talk about it is that often we can control how we think of a situation or a person or an event. We can control what we do. So how we think and what we do, that's the realm of our control. You'll notice that I didn't say we can control how we feel, because our feelings are going to wash through us and roll over us and settle into us anyways. But then they also pass and shift and change. So when we're thinking about what can we control, it's really how do we think about a situation and what actions can we take? Resilience also involves an idea of having a good sense of humor. And it's also, you know, healing to have laughter or even smiles in our life. So when we think about this, sometimes when I'm struggling, you know, I'll purposely choose a funny book to read or watch a comedy movie that I enjoy. And, you know, that what makes us laugh is different for everyone. So, you know, I don't generally make suggestions for people, but I do invite people to find something that makes you laugh. And when you're having a difficult time, you have the opportunity to watch that, to listen to it, to read it, and allow yourself to just settle into the laughter and see how that helps the emotions shift, how it helps your perspective shift. And so we also come to this idea in resilience of having healthy boundaries. We need to create healthy boundaries in our lives so that we are saying yes to ourselves too. Remember, when I talked about the risk factors for burnout, people who are people pleasers or trying to fix things all the time, or think they're the only person that can do it, don't have very good boundaries, and often don't have a very good life balance, you know, because they're trying to be everything to everyone and running all the time. So when we say no to something, it gives us a little space to say yes to ourselves as well, right? It might be something simple like I don't work Monday nights, because on Monday nights I go home and I have, you know, my whatever you have for your dinner, and then you watch your sitcom, or you read your book, or you knit, or you play baseball with your buddies, or whatever you do. It's a boundary around Monday nights that helps you balance your work life. Those boundaries become important because rest and recovery is such a critical part of resilience. You know, we need time to rest, and we need time to recover from the energy that we expend taking care of people, the energy that we expend meeting the needs that we go out in the world and meet every day, and sometimes meet at home as well. When in 2020, I heard Amanda Rocheleau talk about passive rest versus active rest. And so when she talked about passive rest, she talked about having the two-handed tea. And so this idea, I love this concept, because how many of us have poured ourselves a cup of coffee or tea or hot chocolate, and then, you know, we're finding ourselves trying to drink it and it's cold because we were doing 3 other things while we were trying to drink it. So I invite you to think about some rest by this simple act of making yourself a hot beverage, holding it in your hands, using both hands to hold it, enjoying the scent, inhaling that, feeling the warmth, as you hold it and also as you sip the liquid, and spending the time that it takes you to finish that drink, just drinking the drink. And so what you're doing is, you know, giving yourself a mini respite by holding your drink with two hands and taking time to finish it while it's warm. Active rest is a little different. She talked about it as cruise control. And so active rest is when you give your mind something to distract it with. So it might be watching TV, it might be video games, it might be some kind of hobby where you are resting your mind from the things that drain it but giving it something to concentrate on. It might be jigsaw puzzles, crossword puzzles, other kinds of hobbies. Rest is really important. We also have the need for social support and connection to feel resilient. And so we want to think about, how do we connect with people? How do we connect with people in all the different parts of our lives? It's important to feel like you are with people or have some connection to people who understand you, who get what you do and who you are, and know a little bit about how you feel and what's important to you. And it's a really good feeling when there's that mutual relationship. And so you feel the same way about them as they feel about you in terms of enjoying each other's company, having things in common. And as adults, it gets harder to make friends. So it's important to keep it on the table, because it's easy to get caught up in the routines of our lives and not remember to make some time for those social supports. Resilience also is related to a sense of gratitude. And this image of a rainbow over a canyon with the phrase, gratitude teaches us to appreciate the rainbow and the storm, I like this image because even on our worst day, even on the most difficult day, we can find something that we can be grateful for. Maybe it was that the sun was shining. Maybe it was that we were able to wear our favorite shirt that felt soft and comfortable. Maybe somebody was kind to us when we were at the grocery store, or maybe we were kind to someone else and we were grateful for that opportunity to offer kindness and make the world a little better, even though we're having a difficult day. So when we think about this idea of gratitude and resilience, there are a couple of practices that I often invite people to try. One is the 3 good things challenge, where at the end of each day, you sit down and I often suggest people write it in a separate journal that's just for gratitude. If you journal about other things like free writing or other kinds of journaling, I suggest you keep a separate gratitude journal, simply because then if you're having a difficult day, you're able to flip back through the gratitude journal and it's just full of things that you've appreciated in the last little while. The longer that you keep the journal, the more of a record of good things in your life that you have. And the reason that this exercise is useful is because it helps turn your mind to the positives. Our brains are wired to look for negatives. We have, danger sensing abilities because that's how we survive. But we can almost get caught in that rut of only seeing negatives, particularly when we're facing challenges or going through hard times. And this gratitude practice of finding 3 good things at the end of each day can help us retrain our brains to have balance and notice the positive too. If it's a really bad day and maybe you can only find 1 good thing, that's okay too. It doesn't have to be 3 good things every day. And if you really don't want to or don't feel like or can't write in a journal, it's also okay just to turn your mind and think about 3 good things at the end of each day, because just the act of turning your mind to your gratitudes, turning your mind to the positives, is enough to start changing how you feel. And so similarly, I also invite people to think about a 52 card thank you challenge. I'm doing that this year. I have so far this year, I have written a thank you note for every week. I haven't written a thank you note every week because some weeks I write 2 or 3. But the idea is that at the end of the year, I'll have sent 52 thank you cards to people who have done something to make my life easier, to improve my life, to make me feel good, or done something that I appreciate. And it started because I was, as we all have been at times struggling, I was struggling to focus on what's good. And so this thank you card challenge really helped me shift into that. I already have a gratitude journal, and I don't keep it every day, but I do keep it fairly regularly. And these things kind of help lift me up when I'm struggling with what's happening around me. Self-care is an important part of resilience, and it's multifaceted. Self-care is physical. It's also emotional, social, and spiritual. And so you can see on this slide where there are lists of things that there are many different ways to take care of yourself. It includes things like, movement, moving your body, making sure your body has enough sleep and nutrition, but also things like kindness and forgiveness, having good boundaries, like we mentioned, that's actually self-care. Communication, having time together with people that you appreciate, that time alone to rejuvenate, restore, and refresh yourself. Time in nature, journaling, making art of any kind. Those are the kinds of things that renew you, refresh you, and bring you energy, and help us avoid burnout. So self-care, it can be defined as a deliberate practice of knowing your needs and desires, and then taking responsibility for them and living in a way that honors them. And that was a quote from Amanda, again, that I really appreciated, because I think that self-awareness is a big part of it, but then also taking ownership and making small changes in your life that honors your needs and desires, that values you and the things that you need and desire. It's the difference really between looking like the top rope, which is frayed and has only one strand holding it together, or the bottom rope, which has multiple vibrant strands banding together to make a strong braid. It's also the difference between a balancing act, like the picture on the left where the person's balancing 4 plates on sticks. It looks a little precarious. And true balance, where we see the picture on the right with the stones piled in such a way that they're nicely balanced. When we think about the difference between our life as a balancing act, where we're, juggling a bunch of things at once, or true balance, where we have included the things that are most important to us and delegated or done less of the things that just take our energy, right? Self-care helps us do that. I love this quote by Carl Bryan, which says that taking good care of you means that the people in your life will receive the best of you and not what's left of you. So I included 2 handouts, and these are the 2 handouts. The one on the left is 6 ways to practice grounding with anxiety and tense emotions. We all face this. As I said at the beginning, near the beginning of the presentation, we all face anxiety and stress and intense emotions at times. And so what we want is ways to calm ourselves, ways to bring ourselves back to our baseline, to remind ourselves that we're safe here now and that we can handle what's coming. We have strengths, we have resources. And so this grounding worksheet, this poster, reminds us sometimes how we can do that. And it's often a matter of using our senses, doing things that are physically calming, like taking long, slow breathing. Intentional breathing is what I usually call it. Although sometimes I call it relaxation breathing, and sometimes I call it strategic breathing, depending on who I'm talking to. But that idea of a 4-7-8 breath, right, where you inhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, and exhale for a count of 8, that actually activates the calming center of your nervous system. That's going to help calm down the alarm that your body is sending out. That's an anxiety alarm, an anxiety reaction. And similarly, then on the page that's on the right side, we have 50 ways to take a break. And I love this poster because it has such a wide range of things that almost everybody can find something on there that would feel like a break to them, and at the same time, everybody can probably find something on there that is the last thing they would want to do for a break, that feels like it would be make them anxious and stressed. So for example, when I was 12, I loved to climb trees, and I would climb trees and hang out in them, and I found that very relaxing. At 52, I am way less likely to climb a tree to take a break. I'm more likely to get a break if I tried to climb a tree, like a bone broken or something. So we don't, 12-year-old me wouldn't find the same things as a break that I find now. So I like to include these because there's so much variety, and it's important to remember that every person at different stages in their life will need different things to calm themselves down, to feel strong, to build themselves up. And so it's often a matter of trial and error. And sometimes we have to try new things or have little posters like this to remind us of what is it that we need? What do you need personally? What's going to help you? And once you take a good look at those two posters, then I always invite people to get a cue card and write down the top 5 things, because when we're under stress, our brains don't work as well. When our brain is sending off an alarm that we're in some danger, there's a threat, something's going wrong, it kind of shuts down our logical thinking, and it kind of scrambles our emotion regulation a bit. And so we can get caught up and forget the things that normally help us calm down. And so if you have a cue card around with your top 5 on it, it'll act like a little reminder. And so sometimes I say, tape one to your bathroom mirror, put one in your backpack or your purse or your bag of some kind, keep it in your pocket, put it in your glove box, in the car, any place that it will remind you when you're stressed out, oh yeah, I can do this. I can listen to my playlist, right? You can make yourself a playlist that works when you're struggling. When I was in university, I had a playlist, only back then we called them mixtapes. And the tape that I made was for bad days. And so if I had a bad day at school and work, and I worked in a roadhouse cooking and serving, so there were some bad days sometimes. I would come home and I would put that tape in, and the first songs were always angry songs. So I had a few angry songs, and I would sing in an angry voice. And then the next couple of songs were sad songs. And so I would sing, and I would be kind of sometimes tearful or just sad feeling. I would let the feeling come and be. And then the last songs on it were, calming songs, ones that kind of soothed me. And it ended with a song called Good Feeling. That was just about sort of holding on to that feeling a little bit longer. And so, knowing yourself, the songs that worked for me might not work for you, right? And so knowing yourself and finding the things that do work for you, creating this top 5 list for yourself and checking it once in a while, because sometimes things change. What helps you now might not help you in 5 years. You might find something new or need something different. That's a big part of how do I stay resilient? How do I take all these factors that I've talked today about are things you can do something practically about and help you stay well. Shinzen Yun talked about suffering as pain times resistance. And so, the idea is that pain comes from dealing with something that's difficult, and suffering comes from getting locked into negative thoughts about what's difficult. And so, compassion is the solution to suffering. Compassion for ourselves and for others helps us relieve the suffering in the world because it helps us shift out of getting locked in negative thoughts. You'll remember that I said coping with our thoughts is a big part of being resilient, right? So how do we have compassion for ourselves and others? And Kristen Neff has done some excellent work in the area of self-compassion. And her 3 primary points that she makes is that self-compassion involves first noticing suffering in yourself and others. So sometimes we are so busy fixing things and knowing what to do and pleasing people and taking care of others' needs that we don't notice suffering in ourselves. And sometimes we're not noticing it in others either, right? So the first step is to just pause for a moment and just notice where there is pain and suffering. And then acknowledge that it's actually common, it's a human experience. We all experience pain and suffering at some point in our life over something. And it's not really helpful to compare one person's pain to another because it's such an individual experience. It can be very helpful when we talk to people who experience the same kind of pain that we have. So sometimes I run bereavement groups, and the bereavement groups tend to be people who have experienced the same type of loss in the kinds of work that I do, because it helps them connect and feel like they're in a room full of people who get it. So I sometimes run grief groups for bereaved parents or for survivors of suicide loss. And so it's this process of having that knowledge that you're not alone with it. And Kristen Neff talks about the fact that we're not alone with our pain. In general, all humans experience pain and suffering. And then being able to respond to ourselves with care, concern, and compassion. And the way that I often talk about this is the idea that, if your best friend was suffering, if they were in pain and suffering, you would probably be very kind to them and supportive, and you would be gentle with them. And yet we're often so very hard on ourselves. We're very critical of ourselves, and we don't offer ourselves that same gentleness that we would offer our best friend. So self-compassion is really about turning that feeling that you have for another person of wanting to care for them and have them feel cared for, turning that inward towards yourself. It's hard to do. It's hard to do when you're used to always meeting other needs and turning to others to care for them first. And Pema Chodron in 2012 wrote a book called Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change, and talked about the idea of committing to causing no harm. So whatever you do, you try not to harm anyone else as you're coping, right? That's part of resilience, and part of living with uncertainty and change as best we can. And to take care of one another. So I bet that most of the people here in this webinar today are pretty good at taking care of others, but not so great at asking for help when they need it, or receiving that help when it's offered, or offering compassion to yourself. So I invite you to think about how you can expand your abilities by being able to ask for help, receive it, and offer compassion to yourself. And then this author talked about the idea of embracing life just as it is. And we know that Tara Brach also wrote a book called Radical Acceptance, which is a similar concept. When we talk about that factor in resilience about having a sense of control, sometimes, most times, in fact, we just can't control things. We have to accept them. And if we can not only accept them, but just embrace it, this is my life, and I'm going to look for the things I can be grateful for. I'm going to try to do no harm, and I'm going to try to take care of myself and others and receive care. Then we can live our best life despite the uncertainty and change of the human life. So when we're thinking about that, we want to think about how we are in the world and consider, do we act like a sponge where we soak in all of the hard things, all the bad stuff? Or do we find ourselves acting like a rock where we just let it run off us, it bounces off us, we don't absorb any of it? And I invite you to think about the idea of being more like a strainer or colander, I guess, depending on what you call that implement, and letting through the stuff that doesn't serve you or that's not needed, but holding on to the parts that are useful to you. And so that even goes for this webinar, right? So there may be things today that I talked about that you want to hold on to. Those are the good parts for you. There may be other parts that are not useful to you because they don't resonate with you or they don't match where you are right now. And so you have the choice about letting go of anything in the webinar today that didn't suit you or that you didn't like, and just holding on to the parts that resonated with you and that you felt made an impact that you could use, right? So when we think about that, again, it comes down to how do we think about things, right? How do we think about things and what can we do? So a reminder that if you don't make time for wellness, you will end up taking time for illness. Our well-being is important, and only we have the power to really make it a priority. I want to leave you with a strategy of the STOP strategy. And so when we think about the STOP strategy, when you're starting to feel anxious and stressed, when you are in distress, try to stop what you're doing, even if it's just for a moment. Stop what you're doing. Take a few deep breaths. When we do 4, 7, 8 breathing that way, 3 breaths takes less than 1 minute. So you can do 3 deep breaths in less than a minute. Observe what's happening in your mind and body. Do you have any tightness in your chest or your gut, the back of your neck, your head, your jaw? Where do you hold stress? Remember that self-awareness is so important. Observe what's happening in your mind and body, and then you can proceed intentionally and with compassion for yourself. This is a hard situation I'm dealing with. It's causing me some stress, but I can take a few breaths, notice that it's hard, and I can take the next steps to handle the situation. So I invite you to think about trying this tool the next times that you find yourself feeling the stress build in a situation you're coping with. And finally, I want to remind each of you that you are a light in this world. And I want you to just make yourself comfortable and take a nice deep breath as I remind you that you are one person doing the best you can in sometimes difficult circumstances. Like other times of great upheaval, this too will pass. Take a deep breath. Learn, rest, and try again. That is all you can do, and it is enough. You will move through this in your own way and at your own pace. You are already adapting. Inhale calm and allow a feeling of peace. Exhale stress. Let it all go. You have everything you need within you to feel and to heal, so you can continue to shine your light for yourself and for the world, one breath at a time. I thank you for coming today. And we've got some time for some questions now if anybody wants to ask about any of the things we talked about.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I truly appreciate it. I was hesitant on turning my camera on because you got me in the mood. And what really resonated with me was that part with learn, rest. And I've already forgotten the third thing, but I will have to replay. And so I learn, and that I need to remember to, of course, rest and try
Yes.
again. That was the
Yes,
third.
that was
Learn,
it.
rest, and try again. Beautiful presentation, Maureen. And it's something that, in the work that we all do online here as individuals that support others, we really need to take care of ourselves. So we were happy to be able to offer this webinar as part of funding that we got through Victims and Survivors of Crime Week. This year's theme was Power of Collaboration. So we thought it truly was needed to give supports to those out there in the field supporting others, especially in these complex cases of elder abuse. So truly, thank you. I'm just checking the Q&A box. Oh, I'm seeing just thank you for your beautiful meditation. I'm seeing in the chat box, I have over 23 chats echoing thank you for the beautiful presentation. We did get a lot of questions around making some of your handouts available to individuals, clientele. I assume that's more than fine.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do,
you can search them on the website, and you'll see, if you look closely, that the credit is on each poster.
Great. I think many of the participants today want to print them off and share them with their clientele. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. I do want to close out the webinar with some very valuable supports for our older adults in our community. We are lucky here in Ontario to have the Senior Safety Line. It's managed by the Assaulted Women's Helpline, available 365 days a year. 24/7. It's great that it's offered in over 200 languages, which really eliminates that main barrier for our seniors to get the much needed support, information, and necessary referrals. I do want to highlight it's a busy week with our webinars. So tomorrow, believe it or not, we usually do one a week. So this week we're doing 3 webinars, and we're absolutely thrilled to be able to offer tomorrow, preventing domestic homicides with older couples. This presentation is not to be missed. So please register, space is limited, and you'll be able to find the links online and via our website. These are some of our wonderful tools and resources that we're so proud to have developed and offer to our community members. We do have a wonderful safety planning guide for individuals trying to keep safe in unhealthy and domestic violence relationships. And of course, knowing your legal rights and elder abuse. These can all be downloaded on our website. And again, I'm going to plug the evaluation because this is where we get great ideas like the webinar we just were able to offer you today. I do want to make our information available. You can reach us over the phone, on social media, like and follow us. I do want to just double check the Q&A box. We're just getting more thank yous. I just don't want to miss out a question. I see that Maureen has made available her direct email, which is a great resource for everyone here. And I want to just close out today's session with thanking you again, Maureen. It was great to see you. And I can tell from the chat box and the Q&A that it was much appreciated. Us care professionals just never take the time for ourselves. So again, thank you, Maureen. Let's stay in touch. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.